everybody. It's another Thursday evening. By the way, it's beautiful here in the Pacific Northwest. Fantastic autumn day. I'm your host, S.K. Barrett. Joining me is the lovely and talented Wes Hobrick and the ever entertaining Kelly Evans.
Hi.
Say fuck it is fall, isn't it?
It, well, I mean, weather-wise, but not, you know.
No, officially it is autumn. Sorry.
Oh
It's
shit, it
true.
is.
It's
I,
official.
I missed a couple of weeks in there.
I'm more the endless summer kind of guy, so
I,
Yeah, you can hear your voice there.
I'll
I,
grin and bear it.
I like autumn. I like October especially. Weather-wise here, it's beautiful.
There's a little bit too much pumpkin spice around, though. I mean, do we really need pumpkin spice Cheerios?
No,
This is
Okay.
true.
yeah. Pumpkin spice is actually just spice. There's no pumpkin flavor because pumpkin doesn't have a flavor.
Yeah.
That's why they put spice in it.
Okay.
All right, so we have a crazy ass show tonight. People who love to poison. All through history, we got a bunch of people. It's a team poison show. But first, do we have any history?
Yeah, we do have
This
a bit
week
of
in
that.
crime history.
Dun dun dun. 920, 1928. We talked a bit about this guy last week. Northcott, the California child killer, is arrested in Canada. 921, 1998. After 16 years on the run, Ira Einhorn is arrested for his girlfriend's killing. 922, 1933. John Dillinger helps 10 convicts escape in order to start building his gang. He was enlisting them to rob banks.
Well, banks are where the money are, and prison is where the bank robbers are.
Yeah, this is true. Uh,
Go to the
nine,
source.
924, 1995. Robert Ressler profiles South Africa's worst serial killer, Moses Sithole. I think we should do one on him. He had quite the kill count, but yeah, he was caught not that long after, on top of it. 925, 1983. 38 prisoners break out of North Ireland's Maze prison,
Ooh,
which
man,
is
you don't want those
interesting.
Irish running loose.
Nope. I think a lot of them actually got away too. They ended up killing a couple, but most of them made their way out of there.
Wow.
926. We had talked a bit about this guy off air. Harold Shipman kills on this date in 1989 and 1995.
Oh, he's got two anniversaries. We're going to do a show about him, but he deserves a mention tonight as well.
He definitely does once we get there, but some interesting headlines from the past week, too. 919, mom kills her baby after rubbing fentanyl laced heroin on her gums to sleep. That one just
Oh, Jesus.
Wow.
disgusting. Um, September 20th, a
What
pregnant
you know what they used to tell mothers to do?
whiskey.
Yeah, a little rag. You dip a corner of a rag in some whiskey and you let the baby suck on it.
Yeah, I mean, this is true, but it's not like a grain of salt of whiskey could kill you,
No,
you
no,
know?
no, no, no. I mean, people would freak out about that, but
Yeah,
it's one of the old time remedies that they used to tell mothers to do.
yeah, some of them still do rub a little bit on their gums, but
Yeah.
yes, September 20th, this was different. A pregnant mother and her husband were ambushed in their hotel room in South Africa. The woman was hacked to death in front of her 3 month old son, and the husband was stabbed. Still no idea as to motive and no suspects in that.
Wow.
Uh, yeah.
There's a lot of
Not
that shit still going on down there.
there is, it seems. That's one I'll definitely keep you abreast of as I hear about it. September 23rd, a U.S. Army soldier is picked up for planning to kill Antifa activists and bombing a major news network.
Ugh.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all they really had on that for now, too. A good story, well, a sort of good one, on the 23rd as well. Little girl is saved from her suicidal father on the rails in the New York subway. When he jumped in with her, there were bystanders that pulled her out.
Oh
So,
man,
yep.
that's quick thinking.
Um, let's see, just this past day, there's a boy in California dies from a sucker punch at school. Not sure how that exactly happened, but that's how they're describing it.
Hey, Houdini, who was massively fit and strong, died from the same thing.
This is true. He had internal organ damage that was pre-existing, though, didn't he?
Um,
I thought
Unknown.
he did from something. Maybe not. I don't
He
No,
know.
got
I,
in, yeah.
I
He supposedly got into a fight the night that he did the water tank, and they think that maybe he had internal injuries that contributed.
mm.
Oh, okay. That must have been what I was thinking of. But
But the
yeah, the
sucker
last.
punch didn't help.
No, not at all. But the last item that I had on there, September 25th, another transgender murder in Dallas. This is number 3 this year,
Hmm.
just in Dallas. So
Are they? Do you know if they're thinking these are connected? I mean, as far as the perp
I
goes.
I haven't seen anything beyond that connection of them just all being transgender as of right now, but that might change. That's another one I'll keep my eye on. And if we see anything different, I will definitely update.
Cool.
Yep. And that
All
is all I
right.
have.
So let's start with this young lady, Lucretia.
Lucretia, we're kind of sticking Lucretia in because she's got a reputation of being a notorious poisoner. Now, around the same time, actually, might be a little bit earlier. There's also the Medici. So Catherine de Medici is also another one who has just one of those historical reputations. And I just want to say there is actually no proof that Lucretia Borgia actually ever poisoned anyone. Now she did stab someone with a knife. We'll give her
Okay.
that. And there's supposed to be this rumor that she had a poison ring, and that's like a ring that you wear. It had a little compartment at the top that you could lift up and slip some poison into someone's drink, and then close it again. And she supposedly wore one of those. But again, a lot of the stuff that was going on while she lived politically, there were the family politics within her own family. There were the families running the country. There were just all kinds of things going on like that. And most of the rumors came from her enemies, came from her family's enemies.
Uh, was
So
this
we're just
were
setting the
they
record.
Naples or Florence? Do you know?
One of those
She,
Italian city states.
she, oh, she was kind of all over the place.
Okay.
She married, I think, 3 or 4 times just based on what her family wanted. So
Hmm.
she was all kinds. She was all over the place, sort of smaller places like Salerno, Ferrara, Medina, Reggio. She was actually the governor of Spoleto at one point. So we're talking about the little tiny smaller Italian states.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just so of everybody we are talking about, I know we're talking about Poisoner. She actually didn't do it.
Well, well, so much for that.
So much for that.
Sometime,
Yeah.
sometimes your reputation is deserved, and sometimes it's not.
Well, one of the interesting things that one of the family's uh, enemies put about was they used a compound that would have apparently killed people even if there was no arsenic in it. So they basically think that arsenic, she was there.
Nope. I think.
disemboweled pigs, tore out the entrails, sprinkled the entrails with arsenic, and then let them sit there for a little while. And then after they sat there for enough time, they squeezed this semi-putrid stuff from the mess, and they made that into something that's called cantarella, which was apparently what people have speculated the Borgias used. Now, I'm
Hmm.
not saying that, the other Borgias didn't poison anybody, but Lucretia did not. But
Would
yeah,
doing
even,
that add like potency to it, or
well, I don't know. It just seems like even if the arsenic didn't work, the semi-putrid pig guts would probably kill you. I mean, God.
Yeah.
hmm.
Yeah, just
But
the
yeah,
bacterial and poisoning, right?
I know, seriously. But the Italians during that time, tracing, going back as early as the 1400s, they were just poisoning everybody. Poison was the choice to get rid of your enemies, to get rid of a husband you didn't want, to get rid of a brother or family member or something. Um, so this mysterious potion that the Borgias, and I think also the de Medicis used, they think it had arsenic in it, but they also thought it had been a mixture of copper, the arsenic with some phosphorus, and then actually prepared in a decaying carcass of a hog.
Hmm.
Jesus.
So any
Hey,
one
you
of
were
those could be
talking a
good.
bit about the ring there. How often would it be that they would get somebody else to plant the poison for them?
Oh, all the time. Like the next woman we talk about, she didn't actually poison anybody herself, but she provided the poison for other people to use.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, quite often you could through secret means you could find a way of obtaining poison and either pay someone to do it for you. For example, someone who worked in the kitchen could quite easily, if you gave them poison, could quite easily just slip it into the soup. Because a lot of these women that were having their husbands killed were high class, high ranking women. They wouldn't have been cooking themselves.
Right.
They may have served their husband a drink and slipped it into his wine, but they also could have slipped it to someone in the kitchen to put into the food.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, and before we get too far beyond that, you were just talking a bit about arsenic there. It made me think of this kind of famous woman from around this area. Her name was Kate Brewington Bennett, known as the St. Louis Beauty. She lived from 1818 to 1855, and this is back when, I don't know if the listeners know this, arsenic was used as a beauty treatment. Um, Kate was regarded as the most beautiful woman in St. Louis, and she died suddenly at the age of 37. Her very white complexion had been the envy of many, and an autopsy revealed that she had been taking small doses of arsenic to retain her desired paleness.
Oh God.
You crazy Victorians.
yeah, and then she became permanently pale.
Yeah, and not even realizing that arsenic gets its effects from being cumulative in your body, too.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
blood level.
sciences and chemistry were, you know, hard subjects.
That's all
Yeah.
you got to say on that subject, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's just a slight diversion right there. Made me think of her.
All right. Speaking of makeup,
Yeah, that's actually a very nice segue there. Well done.
Thank you.
So this woman has been in the news recently. If you subscribe to the number of history channels that I do on Facebook and Twitter, then you will definitely have seen this. Her name is Julia Tofana, and she is quite possibly one of the most prolific killers, at least poisoners, that we have ever come across. They estimate that she actually killed, or she contributed to the deaths of over 600 people. Um, so she lived in Italy. She died in Rome. So she lived in Italy in the 1600s, 1650s. We don't know a lot about her. She was possibly the daughter of a woman called Tofania Damo, who actually was accused of murdering her husband. She's been described as very beautiful, very smart, very intelligent. She spent a lot of time learning from apothecaries, and she was always present when they made up their mixtures for whatever, just for everyday cures. And she gained all this knowledge so that she was actually able to start mixing her own stuff, which also included a poison that became known as aqua tofana, which is Tofana's water, basically. Um, there's a bit of a funny, it's possible her mother actually made it and passed the recipe down. We certainly know that Julia passed the recipe down to her daughter. So there's kind of a family business here.
Yeah, I got the
And
meme.
yeah, and she basically began to sell poison to women who wanted to become widows. So she would, she either through either the rich people, she would sell them this stuff, and she would charge them huge amounts for it, or every once in a while, she would take on sort of a charity case. There might be a poor woman who was just, either being beaten or her husband was awful, and she would help them by, giving the poison for free and letting them get rid of their husband. So I'll go through a little bit about her, just a little bit what we know about her. So she actually was very, very smart. She was a smart businesswoman. She actually put together a team of people, um, which she basically did her, I guess you could say they kind of did her bidding for her. So they ran around getting the ingredients. They ran around and they made the poison. So she had two poisoners, she had two saleswomen, and she had a priest who, well, a kind of dubious priest who had a brother who was an apothecary who didn't care who he sold arsenic or poisons to. So she had this little close group of the six people, and it was this gang of six who made it and sold it in Rome during the 1650s. And we say made it and sold it, like they sold it to everyone. They just,
They didn't
it
care.
actually got to, yeah, it actually got to the point where things started getting suspicious because apparently huge numbers of women, both young and old, were confessing to their priests that they poisoned their husbands with some new slow poison. And it was noticed in the streets that there were a huge amount of young widows walking around. It was just very strange.
Oh, okay.
So,
So just to be clear, the people buying it knew what they were buying.
oh yeah, yeah, they bought it on purpose.
Okay.
Yeah. Because they bought it for the purpose of murdering someone. Usually, a lot of women, mostly women, bought it, and they bought it to murder their husbands.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. But they got a little bit too greedy and started selling it, like overselling it, I guess. And then because all these people were then, all these young women and older women and everything were confessing to their priests that they'd killed their husbands, and the priests were like, okay. And then in society, it was noticed that there were like a huge amount of young widows walking around. It was so it finally started getting investigated.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, basically, it was kind of clever what they did. So there's sort of a glass jar. It's like a Catholic thing, and it's called Manna of Saint Nicholas. And basically, what it was it was a healing oil. So it was this jar that supposedly it was sweat from the saint's bones, and it was like a miraculous healing oil. So what Julia did is she actually put her aqua tofana into a Manna of Saint Nicholas jar and gave that to the woman who wanted to get rid of her husband. So if anybody saw this in your house or saw it on your
Oh,
dressing table,
yeah.
it was a devotional. They would not question it at all.
You mean it
In
didn't
fact,
have a
it would
skull and
probably be
crossbones and three X's on it?
it did not. Maybe on the bottom. But yeah, it would have been kind of an insult to actually you know, question someone's devotion. So I thought that was just absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
They've never actually been able to figure out what was in the mixture. There's been all kinds of people. There's speculations because basically, with arsenic, you have signs that there has been arsenic poisoning. If you do an autopsy, there will be blackened organs,
Right.
depending on how it was administered. Sorry. The thing with this Julia is she was accused of poisoning someone or accused of supplying the poison, and she fought against it, even though she actually had done it. And she insisted that there be an autopsy on this dead person. And they opened him up. They opened up his chest. They looked at, his lungs and his heart and his liver, and there was not one sign of arsenic in it. Not one
Hmm.
sign that this guy, like, and they've known since the 1400s that arsenic, the signs of arsenic, what it does to you, how it's kind of like a slow burn, and it builds up in your system. And it was a commonly used rat poison since the 1400s. So very well known. They know what they're looking for. They found no evidence of arsenic poisoning in this poor guy at all, even though we know she did it. So they're trying to figure out how she mixed this stuff without there being any sign of poison whatsoever. And to this day, no one's been able to figure that out.
So, where do you get arsenic from?
It's a type of it's a rock, like it's a mineral of some sort. I think I guess it's mined.
Okay.
I remember reading something about it. Sorry, I should have really looked this up, considering how many people were using arsenic.
In the
Yeah,
Earth's crust,
it's a mineral, and
small quantities in rock, soil, water, and air.
yeah, so you have to go and sort of mine it.
It's also a submineral. You can get it out of other minerals, it says here.
I'm not sure how advanced they were as far back as this. We're talking 1650s, so we know there was a lot of alchemy going on. We know there was a lot of interest in, minerals and what they do and things like that. And there was obviously a lot of interest in arsenic, so I'm sure they had a lot of people working on it.
Oh, you can get it right out of a volcano, too.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, Rome, come on. There's, Italy,
Does it
there's
have to
tons of
be a
volcanoes.
live volcano?
That
Because
I'm not
those are a
sure
bit
of. I would have
those are
to
a bit
dig
tricksy.
deeper.
That's a little tricky to get,
Just
you
head
know.
on over to Pompeii.
Yeah, you think just a little bit tricky to get into. You reckon they were rappelling down the inside of the volcano, scooping it up, and then climbing back up again?
We have 4 volcanoes in my state.
Now you
Seriously?
can get it just around the soil, it says,
Oh,
when
Interesting.
you're
okay.
looking at
So
it from volcano.
I guess someone went and traveled to a dead volcano and, I don't know, chopped pieces
Yeah,
up or,
It's only one way, though.
they had
yeah.
volcanoes in Italy.
Oh, tons of them. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, I just said that,
yeah.
but
Well, I think
There's that.
they had more than they had more than Pompeii. There was Etna as well.
Well,
yeah.
there's also a supermassive volcano that's right sort of around the toe bit of the boot. And it's another one of those Yellowstone Park ones. It's like
Oh, really?
due to go off at some point. We're not sure when.
Whoa.
But now we're getting onto volcanoes. Yeah, we don't want to
Yeah.
scare people. It freaks the hell out of me knowing that Jellystone thing is about to go off any time now.
Mm.
So anyway, let's go back to talk about the agonizing pain caused by arsenic.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, symptoms of arsenic poisoning. We might as well go through those.
Let's do that.
So
Yeah.
so
Just
agonizing pain in the stomach. So we're talking like not just your normal I have a stomach ache, like we're talking absolutely gut wrenching knife, in your stomach pain, and also in your throat. And there is also vomiting, which you might expect with something poisonous,
yeah.
and extreme thirst and dysentery. Now I don't know if you get the dysentery first and then the dehydration causes the extreme thirst, or if they go hand in hand. But all of those are the sort of the chief symptoms of arsenic poisoning. Now, a lot of people, what you do is and I'm talking like I know what I'm like, I actually do this myself. And historically, what people have been known to do is put small amounts, each day, so that the person
Right.
being poisoned just gets gradually
Hmm.
sicker and sicker. And it just looks like something natural is happening to them. It's when someone is maybe an amateur, doesn't know what they're doing, and they suddenly give a ton of arsenic to someone and they die horribly and suddenly, then that's when the alarm bells start going off.
It's also an interesting thing that distinguishes poisoning from all other crimes is that with many of them, you have to repeat it time and again with the same person. It's not just, one off, I'm going to shoot you with a
Right.
gun. It's repeated, and that kind
Oh,
of, in
right.
a lot of ways, makes it immune to any mitigating factors, or a lot of mitigating factors, when you're looking at it legally.
Well, yeah, if you're looking at sort of manslaughter versus like murder one, definitely, there's definitely intent with arsenic
Yeah,
poisoning. Absolutely.
Multiple
Yeah, by
intents.
definition. Yeah, exactly. By definition, it's
Yeah.
always there.
I accidentally gave it to him 17 times.
Mhm.
The other interesting thing is, if you're a poisoner during this sort of like the Renaissance, or actually sort of any time, but particularly during the Renaissance in Italy and Europe, the two really good things about using arsenic is we talked about the symptoms, and if it's used well or used over a period of time, it just looks like your victim is getting just ill from natural causes. But the other thing is, and particularly in Italy at this time, everybody was hugely, deeply religious.
Right.
So it gave the dying husband time to put his affairs in order. And it also ensured that he was able to repent his sins. And since repenting your sins was thought to guarantee absolute entry into heaven, then if you're killing this guy and he's repented all his sins, you know he's dying, you know he's going to heaven now. Well, you don't really need to feel so guilty about it.
He's going to a better place.
He is. You've taken,
Mm.
you don't have to feel guilt over that eternal soul thing because he's repented and he's gone. So yeah.
Wow.
There's the quote I was thinking of. This is poisoning, of course, differs considerably from many other crimes, frequently committed in uncontrolled passion and in the heat of the moment. The innate character of the crime of homicidal poisoning demands subterfuge, cunning, and what is equally important, usually a period of careful planning, and also not infrequently the repetition of the act of administering poison.
Yeah.
Its characteristic being one of premeditation, it is a method of murder which therefore cannot be the subject of extenuation as some other forms of killing can. It's from a detective named Glacier.
Except in the case of terrorism,
Mm.
which we talked about, right? The ricin,
Well,
right, where they, the objective was to poison a lot of people immediately and kill them immediately.
oh, you mean that there's not a repetition with
Right.
those. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Jonestown in a lot of ways too.
True.
Yep.
Yep.
So how many people do they guess she killed?
They think at least 600. Now that's her and her gang.
Jesus.
She poisoned people over the course of about 50 years. And a century later, there was this abbot who wrote, there was not a lady in Naples who had not some of it lying openly on her toilet among her perfumes. She alone knows the file and can distinguish it. So it's like it just makes it sound. I mean, this is 100 years later, and stories get larger and larger and larger. But yeah, it just makes it sound like every woman had some just on standby just in case or something like that.
Yeah.
Be careful who you piss off.
Yes, seriously. Now,
Good
apparently
advice.
she never got caught. Now, after she died, members of her gang definitely got caught because after she died, I don't know, I think maybe she was a little bit more sensible. And like I said, I think after she died, her gang kind of went nuts with the whole thing and started overselling, and the confessions started coming in, and there were too many widows on the streets. But Tofana herself, Julia herself, we really don't know what happened to her. One source says she's died of natural causes in 1651. Another one says that she actually found sanctuary in a nunnery and she lived there for a number of years. Another says that she was actually still making the poison while she was in the nunnery, and she had like this dispensing network of nuns and priests and stuff like that. Another source said that she was actually dragged from the nunnery, tortured, and executed. Although we have like 4 different dates for her death, so we really don't know very much. In one really detailed account, it says she was dragged from the sanctuary, she was strangled, her body was thrown over the convent wall from where she'd been dragged from. So yeah, it just doesn't sound like people liked her very much.
Wow. She was just misunderstood.
Well, the men wouldn't have. Yeah, I'm assuming the women would have kind of liked her.
Ah. Well, maybe not the mothers of the men.
Well, I would hope not.
They might not have liked her so much.
The mothers of,
Mm.
well, yeah, I guess. I'm trying to think. I've got a note here someplace. There was actually a printed warning to the citizens of Rome in the 1650s, warning them that there was poison going around and like be careful.
Wow.
Wow. Dang.
I'm trying. I had a copy of it, but I don't see it in front of me now.
Okay.
But yeah, that's how serious it got. Like the Vatican actually printed a huge warning.
Me and SK, we should have put the graphic in of Socrates drinking the hemlock. I
Right?
can't believe I didn't think of that till now.
Oh yeah. But that was, well, yeah, I guess that was poisoning, wasn't it? It was kind of
It
forced him to
was,
take it, didn't it?
yeah, he was kind of, that was his sentence, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
for being too damn smart. That's what
Uh,
it gets. Don't read books, kids. That's what it gets. Hemlock.
Yep. Well, then,
yeah.
it's interesting you're looking at that with murder. If you look at poisoning today, and this might be part of what we were talking about, Kelly, before we went on,
Mhm.
it's much more common with suicides today than it is with murder.
Well, I mean, let's face it, it's easy, isn't it? It's less violent than a gun or jumping off a bridge or drowning, and it's just basically if you pick something, I'm gonna say I can't think of the word nice, you'll just fall asleep, right?
Right.
So
And I don't know if it's so much that with a lot of suicidal people as it is just convenience. That if you're truly suicidal, you're not going to be worrying that much about it being an easy way to go. You're
well,
just going to want to go.
Yeah, but
I've
some
always heard,
people just don't want the pain or the mess of other mechanisms.
and I've always heard that it's, and I don't know if this is true, so please, I'm not trying to be offensive or anything, but it's mostly women that they poison themselves or they cut their wrists in the bathtub, and men do the violent guns and jumping in front of trains and things like that.
That is true with the men using the gun more and women slashing their wrists more. I'm not sure about the others, though. I haven't looked at the stats on those, but
I think women are jumpers probably almost as much as men.
mhm.
Okay. I'm wondering about taking poison though, because the only poison the only readily available poisons, and we're talking about opportunity here, would be a nasty death. So do people actually kill themselves with
Well,
poison still?
Oh,
I mean, if
absolutely.
you consider, well, the any drug that you can overdose on would be technically a poison.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
So an opioid overdose would just be pretty much just going to
and
sleep.
yeah, opioids, even benzodiazepines, or even looking around the house, some people just use like drain cleaner for
That would
yeah,
be
that.
but see,
that would be not fun.
that's
No,
horrible. That's you. Why? Oh, geez, yeah, that's
that's
awful.
one of the main things that they tell you to look for if you're a homicide detective doing that. Look for chemical burns on the lips
Oh, right, yeah.
when you're on the scene of a suicide. But yeah, I thought that might be a bit of a segue into some of these stats on poisoning today. Um,
Okay.
Yeah.
that is criminal poisoning, not suicidal poisoning.
Okay.
Um, the offenders are predominantly white, and it's actually pretty equal when you're looking at whites between males and females in terms of their likelihood to poison somebody. Um, let's
Huh.
see, 37.2% are 25 to 40. Let's see. Now, when you get into some of the other races with, what's that beeping? Are
Don't
you
know.
hearing that?
No.
Huh.
No.
I'm hearing it on my end. That's weird.
A
Um,
what?
I was hearing beeping.
Do
I
you
don't
also
know.
smell burning feathers?
I thought it was toast.
uh, yeah, when you look at other races, black males are twice as likely as black females to poison. Not
Really?
sure why
Huh.
that is,
That's
but
interesting.
Only 0.006% of murders in the black community are poison related, though.
Oh,
So,
so it's not big numbers.
yeah. When you look at victim demographics, it's about 50% male, 50% female across the races again.
Okay.
The age, in looking at that, was about 1 week to 75 years for most of these. Oh, I should have mentioned the source for all this. It's the Crime Classification Manual from the FBI.
Okay.
And the exact data they used to prepare it was the FBI's Uniform Crime Report for a given period of time, in this case between 1990 and 1999. And what makes up the Uniform Crime Report are what they call supplementary homicide reports. So those are like the individual blocks that build it, if you will.
Right.
Let's see. Now, when you're looking at the offender attributes, if it's a female victim, it's more likely that she was poisoned by a male across the races. But if
Okay.
you're looking at a male victim, it is equally likely between a male or a female who poisoned them,
Really?
according to them.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious. Jeez.
Yep.
Now, I can't even think of a reason why a man would poison another man.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But now, one thing to keep in mind with some of these numbers, like particularly this next one, is that, with the offenders, they're more likely to be male no matter the race. It was about 48.6% male and about 33% female. But you have the other metric in there of 18.2% unknown gender.
Okay.
So that might skew it. So I didn't put a whole lot of stock into that number there, but the others didn't have that. We're just still flipping through this here. Now, when you look at the relation of the offender to the victim, it was most often the son being poisoned, 9.5%. Daughter came in second place at 7.2%. Wife in third at 6.9%. And in fourth, he had the husband, 5.2%. And backing up a little bit, looking at the stats of homicide within families with poison, it was about 36.1% were poisons.
Really?
Yep. But now another interesting stat here. This is reading right out of the book. However, while it is widely believed that poisoning is predominantly a household or domestic crime, of the reports where the relationship of the offender to the victim was known, more of the victims were outside the family than were within the family. That number was 63.9 to 36.1.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just looking through the rest of this there.
I'm still astounded that in this day and age, people still think they can get away with poison. I mean, there's so many, I mean, even just not knowing anything about the professional side of it, there are so many CSI shows and Bones and forensic
Right.
shows and all this kind of stuff. And surely the stuff they're showing us on television is, it exists. It's not phony. So how can you possibly get away with poisoning someone?
There's almost
Or are
no
all these people getting
cases.
caught?
They're not all getting caught because clearly 18% were unknown gender.
Right.
So
Right.
not everybody's getting caught.
This is true. With the type of poison, if you were interested, 8.7% of female poisoners and 11% of male poisoners used a chemical poison, like Drano. Now, when you're looking at a narcotic poisoning, it was 25% of female poisoners and 37.6% of male poisoners.
I would imagine the stuff, like the Drano and stuff like that would be like opportunity, like weapons of opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, I would agree.
Because
Yeah.
they were at hand, and you didn't have
Yeah.
to go.
Opportunity and where
You didn't have
Yeah,
to go
everybody's
buy
got them.
you don't have much
heroin.
of anything else. Oh yeah, in the states with the highest amount of poisons per their murder rates.
Yeah.
The first one is California.
Oh my God.
18.2% of their
Really?
murders were poison.
Really?
Yep.
I'm surprised by that. It's so sunny out there. I just figured everybody was happy all the time.
Right.
Sorry.
The second one was the state of Washington. 9.8%.
Oh, same side of the country. That's weird.
Yeah, only wetter.
Hmm.
Let's see. Third one was Texas at 6.6%. Then you had Pennsylvania in fourth at 6.4, and sharing the fifth spot, Arizona 3.5, Michigan 3.5, and New York 3.5.
I'd love to see a breakdown of what poisons were used most in each of the states. That'd be kind of cool.
So I'm looking at it in more of an aggregate. The largest by region is the West. And the South comes in second to that at 25%.
What is going on in California? I'm curious about that.
I am not sure.
Well, there's a lot going on in California, actually.
Okay, okay. I walked into that one, yep.
Yep.
Well, that was all very cool. I love all the
Fascinating numbers.
yeah.
So, what about this Marianne Cotton lady?
Oh, she is hugely complicated. This woman is just all over the place. And I really don't know how she didn't get caught before she did, because she ended up possibly murdering about 21 people. What that includes 11 or 12 of her own children and at least 3 or 4 of her husbands. So she she's just okay. So let's start with so she was born on Halloween, which is kind of fun, in 1832, and she was born in England. She basically was her father was a like a coal miner type person, like a supervisor at a coal mine. Um, she had a sister who only lived a few months. She had a brother, a younger brother. When she was 8 years old, they moved, and at the time when they moved, she had all these glowing reports from her Sunday school. They said she was a girl of innocent disposition and average intelligence, distinguished for her particularly
Ouch.
clean. I know, I love the average intelligence. That's like one of those double-handed. And she was distinguished for her particularly clean and tidy appearance. So shortly after that move, they were still, her father was still in the
She's
mining.
not especially bright, but she looks clean.
But she's very clean, yeah. Well, come on, average intelligence that's not a slur. That's
It's
average.
right.
There's nothing wrong with being average.
Most
Not the
people are
sharpest tool, but you sure are shiny.
Yeah,
almost
well, there you
everybody is
go.
average. That's the whole way the bell curve works.
We
So
won't get
yeah,
into
but it's not.
who's average and who's not.
Hey,
It's just hilarious that they would actually say that.
you and your
I'm just
evil misogynistic bell curve, SK.
I just
God.
Patriarchy.
damn that bell curve. So basically, shortly after she was 8 when they moved, and shortly after they moved, her father who was still working in the coal mining industry. He actually fell down a 150-foot mine shaft.
Ooh.
Ouch.
His body was delivered to the mother in like this burlap sack that had a stamp on it that said "Property of the South Hetton Coal Company." So that's how sympathetic they were back then. Because the house belonged to the coal, like the mining company, and because now they no longer had the husband mining there, they were all evicted. But the mother managed to find another coal miner, and she married him. Actually, not that long after, actually the following year. So she didn't wait around too much. So at the age of 16, Marianne Cotton, or Marianne we'll call her because she's not Cotton yet. She left home to become a nurse, and she actually worked at in a nearby village for someone who actually managed one of the coal mines. So after all of his children, so she was kind of a nanny, kind of a nurse. After all his children had been sent away to boarding school and they were older, she returned to live with her stepfather. Her mother had remarried, and she trained as a dressmaker. So this was, let's see, she was 19 when she returned home. So she's already been a nurse. She's training to be a dressmaker. So at the age of 20, she married another coal person, a man called William Mowbray, and they actually had quite a few children. They had about 5 children. Actually, I think they had 7 children, but 5 of them actually died. Um, None of the deaths are suspicious. They just,
Yeah.
she just didn't, they just died in infancy or they died at birth. But they
Not
died really
uncommon in
young.
those days.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Um, but she had a daughter called Margaret Jane, and she lived. Now, they moved back to Northeast England, and he then became a fireman aboard a steam vessel. And then after that, he decided he wanted to get back into coal mining. And they had another daughter, Isabella. Now, do you remember the first daughter, Margaret Jane? At this point, she actually also died. And then they had another daughter called Margaret Jane, and a son, but the son also died from gastric fever. So you can see why it's kind of hard keeping track of this. So far she hasn't poisoned anyone, and she's lost, I think, 4, 5, 6 children just through natural causes. Um,
Wow.
this is where it gets interesting. Now, I haven't been able to figure out what exactly happened, but William, the husband, died of an intestinal disorder. Um, William and his kids, I think there's still 2 children that are actually still living, were insured by the British and Prudential insurance offices. So Marianne collected a payout of £35, which would have been about
Mm.
£3,200 in 2018, which would have been about $7,500 maybe. So
Not a
that would have
lot of
been,
money, but
well, it was
but
about
I
half a
guess it
year's.
depends on your circumstances, though.
Yeah, it was half a year's wages for a
Yeah.
manual laborer at the time. So, and she also got, for the son that had died, she also got £2 5 shillings. So after that, she moved again. She moved to County Durham, and she struck up a relationship with a gentleman called Natras. Now that's a really nice way of saying that she had an affair with him. Um, During that time, the other child that she had had, who the second child, who she named Mary Jane, that child died of typhus fever. So of all of the 9 children she's now had, all of them have died except for one. And
Out of how many? 9?
out of 9 children so far, all of them have died
Jeez.
except for one. And she hasn't poisoned any of them at this point. So this is just
Yeah,
how,
that's the times.
what her, yeah. Um, so she returned. So after the child died, she left this guy. She returned home. She took up employment at, I love the name of this place, the Sunderland Infirmary House of Recovery for the Cure of Contagious Fever Dispensary and Humane Society. I love it. So
Jeez.
she went
Try
back. So she
try putting
basically,
that on a business card.
A
tell me
gigantic
about
sign
it.
out front.
So
Yeah.
she basically went back to being a nurse instead of a dressmaker. The only child that she had left was Isabella from William Mowbray before he died, and she sent Isabella to live with her mother. So things seem to be getting on track. One of the patients at the infirmary was an engineer called George Ward, and they actually married. They, sorry, I'm losing my voice. They got close. They married in 1865. He was already ill, like he was in the infirmary, but he
Hmm.
continued to get worse, and he died in 1866. So the following year, after a long illness, which apparently he had paralysis and intestinal problems. Now, on his death certificate, it says that he died of English cholera and typhoid. But the doctor at the time said, even though, he gave evidence that this guy, Ward, had been very ill, he'd been really surprised that the death was so sudden. Um,
Hmm.
Marianne then collected the insurance money. So there's suspicion number 2, husband's gone. Husband number three. He was a shipwright. His wife had recently died, and he hired Marianne to be sort of a housekeeper. Um, a month later, this guy's name is James Robinson. A month later, after he hired Marianne, his baby John died of a gastric fever. And then he turned to Marianne for comfort, and she became pregnant. So, it's like they hugged, and all of a sudden she was with child.
How does that
So she
happen?
started up.
The toilet seat.
So started up, yeah, started up an affair with him. Um, at that time, Marianne's mother became ill with hepatitis, so she went to nurse her. Her mother began to recover, but then suddenly started complaining of stomach pains. And where do we know that from?
Hmm.
So 9 days after Marianne's arrival to supposedly nurse her mother back to health, her mother died. um, so her stepfather married someone else. The daughter from the first marriage was brought back to the Robinson household, so he's still around. And as soon as she was brought back to the household, she soon started developing severe stomach pains and suddenly died. At the same time, two of James Robinson's children, Elizabeth and James, started suffering stomach pains and died. All three children were buried in the last week of April and the first week of May in 1867. And lo and behold, Marianne received a life insurance payment of £5, 10 shillings, and six for her daughter Isabella. Now, at this point, I know we did a show about mothers who kill their children and things like
Yeah.
that, but just to kill your kid for the insurance money and not even that much, it just, I don't know. Okay, anyway. So James Robinson finally, after all this happened, after his two sons died and after her daughter died, all of the same symptoms, he actually married her. He actually officially married her. Um, they had a child, and that child, again, guess what? Died. Natural causes. They had a second son called George. He was born in 1869. So, meanwhile, God knows why he married this woman after all this stuff has happened, but he's starting to get suspicious because after they get married, Marianne starts saying, "Hey, I really think you should have a life insurance policy," and she's bugging him about it. And he soon discovered that she'd run up debts of about £60 behind his back. So do
Whoa,
you remember
that's
that
a huge amount.
£35 at the time was, what did I say? It was about $7,500. So yeah,
Yeah, that was
and
a
she'd
year's
actually,
wages.
yeah, and she'd actually stolen more than £50. That she just, I don't know. And then he also found out that she had been forcing his older children to pawn household valuables. So like they like take stuff from the house and go down to the pawn shop and pawn it and then give her the money. So he kicked her out. He threw her out completely, and he kept custody of the son, the only son they had that survived, George. So now she's living on the streets. She doesn't have anything. A friend of hers introduces her to a recent widower, another recent widower, who had lost two of his four children. So this is Frederick Cotton. So this is where we get her last name from, Marianne Cotton. So she kind of acted as a substitute children, kind of a bit of a nanny. The two children were Frederick and Charles. Um, they were they started having an affair, and again, so soon her 12th pregnancy was underway. So she really had this pattern of sort of recent widowers going to help them, acting as a shoulder for them to cry on, and then getting pregnant, and then they get married. So she actually married him. She was actually still officially married to James Robinson, but Frederick Cotton actually married her in Newcastle upon Tyne in 1870. So their son was born soon after, so she was pretty heavily pregnant. At that point, she learned. Do you remember she had had that affair with that guy called Joseph Natras? She learned that he was available, and she decided, hey, I'm going to go see him. So basically, um,
Jesus.
she basically started an affair with him. And she persuaded her entire family, this Frederick Cotton's family, to actually move closer to where he actually was so she could continue this affair with him. Now,
Wow.
Frederick, yeah, yeah. So in the meantime, Frederick Cotton had gotten an insurance policy for himself and his sons. And less than a year after they moved closer to this ex lover of hers, Frederick Cotton died of gastric fever. This is the official diagnosis.
Huh.
So after that, she collected the insurance. She still kept um, what's his face? Sorry, his name's just gone from me. Joseph Natras, so the person she moved the house closer to be with, and she also, and she actually, after her husband's death, she actually asked him to move in, so he actually became a lodger in the house. So she gained employment. She went back to work. She became a nurse, and one of her patients was a guy called Richard Mann, and she apparently got pregnant with her 13th child with him
Jeez.
and had an affair with him while she was having an affair with this Joseph Natras guy. You could tell it
Man,
took me ages to sort this woman out. Um,
that's she's complicated.
yeah. So
Wow.
in so she is having this affair with these people. So early in 1872, do you remember that Cotton still had two young sons, Frederick and Robert? For some reason, guess what? They both died. They both died in March. And then her first lover, Natras, who moved into her house, he got, for some reason, gastric fever, and he died. And this is strangely after revising his will in Marianne's favor. So,
Wow. Nobody's
yeah,
nobody's connecting the dots here at all.
no, 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 not at all. It was just no. Um,
I mean,
so
people are
there's still,
dropping faster than the friends of the Clintons.
I know, it's ridiculous. So at this point, she's pretty much taken out everybody except for there's still one son left from Charles Cotton. Um, so he's still got a life insurance policy out on him, and so in the meantime, she actually is, I guess, acting as his guardian, and she actually took a life insurance policy out on him. So basically, after Charles Cotton, the guy she was married to, died, she went to become a nurse to help a woman who was ill with smallpox. And she complained, she started complaining about the last Cotton boy, Charles Edward. She was saying he was in the way. There was a parish official who she was friends with, and this guy called Riley, and she was saying, "Hey, Riley, can you have him committed to a workhouse? You got to get him out of my
Jesus.
hair." Um, so she basically told, Riley told her that, well, if you want him in a workhouse, you have to take him yourself. And she basically said that the boy is sick and he won't be troubling us long. He's likely to go the rest of the Cottons. Um, Guess what happened 5 days later? Poor Charles Cotton, the son, dies. Um, so she basically goes to Riley, the official, and says the kid's died. Um, Riley went to the village police and convinced the doctor to delay writing a death certificate until this could be investigated because she cannot get the insurance money until there's a death certificate. So finally, this guy steps in and he says, "Okay, hang on a sec. Do not issue the death certificate. I want to have a nose around."
Yeah.
So she figured this out, that she couldn't get the money. But the first thing she did wasn't after his death, but she didn't go to the doctor. She went right to the insurance officer. Like she didn't even call the doctor. She went right to the insurance. And then she found out that she needed a death certificate. So then she went to the doctor. An inquest was held. And believe it or not, the jury returned a verdict of natural causes.
Mm. Mm.
So she claimed that she used, it's a plant called arrowroot, is how arrowroot biscuits are made, to help his illness. And she said that this official, Riley, had made accusations against her because she had rejected his advances. Um, so at this point, the newspapers start getting involved. So a local newspaper finally figures out the kind of company, she comes to their attention. They figured out she'd moved around northern England and lost three husbands, a lover, a friend, her mother, and 11 children, all of whom had died of stomach fevers. So,
Not exactly creative in her MO.
yeah, I know. It's just, but the fact that she got away with it for so long. So finally, she was arrested. They managed to get the exhumation of Charles Cotton's body. They did the autopsy, and sure enough, it was arsenic. He was, he had the black organs and stuff. So she was charged after his murder, but the trial was delayed because she was actually pregnant again with her last child.
Jesus.
This is the child she had with her second lover, this Richard Mann guy.
The one she was
So
cheating on her first lover with.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. um, so they waited until after the delivery, and her final child is named Margaret Edith Quick Manning Cotton. So there's a mouthful for you.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, she's. um, so there was also a bit of a delay because they had to select the prosecution. There was a lot of politics involved at the time about who gets to appoint who, and you're the friends of so and so, so we can't use you, etc. But during the trial, they actually found someone to defend her, and they said that Charles had died from inhaling arsenic that was used as a dye in the green wallpaper of the home. And the doctor testified that no, it wasn't powder, it was liquid, because I guess he could tell. He said it was on the same shelf as the arsenic. Um, then I guess the defendant argued that was it possible that the chemist, the pharmacy guy at the time, had mistaken arsenic powder for bismuth powder, which was used to treat diarrhea. Maybe he made a mistake and administered arsenic powder. Basically, the jury wasn't having any of it. They retired for an hour and a half, and they returned a guilty verdict.
Wow.
So on the 20th of March, 1873, the Times actually wrote, after conviction, the wretched woman exhibited strong emotion, but this gave place in a few hours to her habitual cold, reserved demeanor. And while she harbors a strong conviction that the royal clemency will be extended toward her, she staunchly asserts her innocence of the crime that she has been convicted of. She was hanged. She didn't actually die because her neck broke. She was
She strangled?
she strangled, and they think the rope was rigged too short, and they think maybe it was done deliberately.
Ooh.
So of 13 children, she only had 2 children survive her. So she killed some of them. A lot of them died naturally, which was crazy.
Man, she would have been
Yeah.
good on that Murder for Money episode too.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. There's actually she's actually got her own nursery rhyme. She was so notorious. So it's not a great nursery rhyme, but it's Marianne Cotton, she's dead and rotten, lying in bed with her eyes wide open. Sing, sing, oh, what should I sing? Marianne Cotton, she's tied up with string. Where, up in the air, selling black puddings, a penny a pair. Marianne Cotton, she's dead and forgotten, lying in bed with her bones all rotten. Sing, sing, what can I sing? Marianne Cotton, tied up with a string. It's not bad. But, you know.
Not bad, not bad. Children were brutal.
I know.
Were.
Well,
oh yeah, were.
yeah.
Oh,
No, the
yeah.
old children were brutal, not now. They're all sweetness.
Okay, yeah.
They don't make up
It's got a
songs
nice,
now.
it's got a nice rhythm to it. Come on,
Yeah, it does.
a nice jump rope rhythm. That's exactly what
So
you want with
what's
these
her
rhymes.
tally?
What was her final tally? Sorry, let me get this. She murdered. Okay, so 3 husbands. Let's see.
9 kids?
21 people.
21. That's
Yeah,
that's
including
more than
11
Bundy.
including 11 of her own children, and she chiefly used arsenic poisoning.
That's substantial numbers.
And she collected the insurance money, and she did it for small amounts of insurance money. She did it because I think I don't know, there was one she did it just because I think she got pissed off at the guy, or I don't know. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, it's almost like, once you start having this easy way out and get away with it, it starts to become your go-to solution, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that actually everything goes horribly wrong. People are getting suspicious. We've seen this before with some of the female killers. I did one a few, I don't remember who it was. I did one about a month or two ago, and every time something happened, she just killed whoever it was and took off, or they burned down a building and take off.
Yeah.
That's where it kind of gets into a compulsion, I think, with some
Yeah.
of them. And
Well,
that
maybe they just find that it's an easy way out.
Yeah.
that's actually a pretty good segue into MVP, the compulsion side of that.
Go
It's
for it.
Yeah, do it.
it's actually Munchausen by proxy, Munchausen syndrome by proxy. People might know it in the popular culture from HBO's Sharp Objects, if you've watched that. It's a
don't know.
fantastic, fantastic show. I highly recommend it.
Also,
Great thriller.
Sixth Sense.
Oh yeah, it was in that. I almost forgot about that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also called factitious disorder, which gets
Oh.
into somatoform. But basically, the goal in Munchausen by proxy is to move into the patient role vicariously. And from this, the people who have it get attention. They get looked at sometimes as heroes for what they're doing, but what they're doing is ultimately faking sickness, and usually a child or somebody they're charged with taking care of,
Hmm.
Is there
or
a difference
actually inducing it.
Is there a difference between, so Munchausen syndrome is when you do it to you make yourself sick for the attention, and Munchausen by proxy is when you make a child or a dependent sick?
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to check I got that clear.
Yep. But
And,
yeah,
and
that's
by the
usually
way, clarification on the word factitious as opposed to fictitious. So
Yes.
fictitious would be a fake illness, but a factitious illness is a real illness, but one that's created on purpose.
Yes. Or just exaggerated. And
Yes.
sometimes they will induce it or they will just exaggerate it. But yeah, that's
But
FACT.
you actually do have a legitimate, like an actual diagnosable illness, whether you've given it to you've given yourself an actual legit illness.
Sometimes they induce
Wow.
it, other times they don't. But
Okay.
yeah, it's actually more common in women, but severe cases are more common in men, which is interesting.
Huh.
But yeah, it's also, by proxy, is also called factitious disorder imposed on another. Often results in unnecessary tests, medications, hospitalizations, and even surgeries. And that's
Ooh.
despite the person knowing that the surgery or the test will be painful on the victim of MBP.
That's awful. I just can't. Sometimes there's things that are going on in other people's brains that I can't. I have trouble placing myself into. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a deeply pathological need for attention. But
Yeah.
usually the symptoms that they fake the most are bleeding, seizures, asthma, comas, diarrhea, vomiting. Accidental poisoning is a big one on there. And that's accidental in quotes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Infections, fever, and SIDS. Between 6 and 30% of the victims die from the symptoms that are induced.
Sorry, say that again. 6 and how many?
Between 6 and 30% die from the symptoms that are induced.
That's crazy.
And 8% of the survivors are permanently disabled.
Wow.
And yeah, usually it's the mother who's seeking attention and sometimes admiration for how she is perceived to be taking care of her kids. And often the siblings of the sick child are being abused at the same time.
Oh. By the parent?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And sometimes they do it because they see their support systems as being virtually non-existent aside from medical staff. But often the mothers who do it have a history of working in medicine too, nurses, EMT, or what have you.
Well, God, with the internet, I would imagine anybody can. I mean, there's so much information out there. All you have to do is go out and start looking for symptoms, and wow.
Oh yeah,
Right.
and absolutely, and that's another big thing with that. They know an inordinate amount about the symptom they're trying to fake.
Right.
But yeah, another thing that's interesting, there's quite often the adults can have the same symptom as the child or the charge that they're trying to, do this with.
So even if it's not, if it's a Munchausen by proxy, the adult will have the same symptoms as the symptoms they're forcing the child to have.
Well, sometimes they can. And that's
Okay.
also because quite often with these, you see just regular Munchausen in
Right.
the
So
adult.
it's both. It's a
Yeah,
combination.
yep, they can be comorbid with each other.
It would kind of lend weight as well. Like, look, doctor, I've got it now. My son has it. It's hereditary.
Right?
Oh yeah, oh
Huh.
yeah. But yeah, this next section that I had on MVP was really interesting. I got it going through my copy of Practical Homicide Investigation.
Sorry, I don't
It's
mean to laugh, but my copy of Practical Homicide.
it's by an NYPD homicide detective who was a lieutenant when he wrote it. But yeah, they consider it a form of child abuse, of course,
Yeah.
where
Right.
the parent or caregiver simulates or directly causes medical distress in their charge um, to gain attention, praise, or sympathy. Um, let's see, the symptomatology can be physically induced or persistently fabricated. Um, Results often fatal. We went through that. He
Does it
noted
say?
it.
Sorry, go
Sorry.
on. Does it say if there's some sort of triggering event? Like I know, like some psychological disorders, like hoarding, there's quite often a triggering event that starts the behavior. Is there anything like that here?
Stress can. Stress, inordinate amounts of stress can cause it as a
Okay.
trigger. But there was a case in New York that he noted from 1972 to 1985. A woman killed 8 of her 9 children.
Oh my God.
Jesus.
Most all the deaths were attributed to SIDS, but they all died from, in their charts, an unexplained illness, and it was only later revealed that it was MBP.
Wow.
So they were
Yeah,
still babies.
yes, yep. And yeah, quite often this is confused with just straight up malingering too, which I think that we talked a bit
Yeah.
about when you were on the show last, Kelly,
Yeah.
where
Sorry, can you remind me again what?
um, the actual difference there, Munchausen and Munchausen by proxy is motivated by things that are specifically internal, like the
Okay.
praise or admiration or what have you. But malingering is motivated. It's where you fake it for something that's external. Um, yeah, days off of work, drug-seeking behavior would
Oh,
also
right.
be malingering.
Okay.
But um,
Well, and a modern variation on malingering would be, a GoFundMe for a non-existent illness.
Right. Okay.
yep, oh yeah, that would definitely be malingering. But the
Hmm.
cops actually have 2 ways, if they suspect that it's MVP, to test their theory.
Oh
The
Oh,
yeah.
first
yeah.
one, um, the first one that they use usually there is the separation, and you'll see the symptoms, clear up pretty quick if you separate the person who has it
Ah.
Oh, so for
from the
example,
person they think it
if you
is.
hospitalize the child and then keep them protected from the parent for like a week, the symptoms start clearing up.
Yep.
Okay.
Um,
Sure.
then the other big thing there that's totally vital is getting a correct history of what's going on.
Oh,
You'll see,
Ah.
you'll see
Right.
mistakes or discrepancies, won't you?
Or
oh yeah,
or or fake, anecdotal doctor visits that have no records.
oh
Oh,
yeah,
they'll
and
do
quite
that.
often they'll just straight up alter the charts too.
Will they
The
really?
people with it. Oh yeah,
Oh,
that
geez.
is very very common. But crap, hold on just a second. I lost my
Yeah, they'll
page. I'm
they'll be
looking
going
at too
on
much
and on and
crap.
on about the number of doctors that they've seen, and a lot of times they've just never even been to them.
Well, something else I've
Oh
heard
yeah,
about people with Munchausen's and Munchausen by proxy is that they keep going to different doctors. So as soon as one doctor starts getting suspicious, they'll immediately move to another one, and they've got like dozens of doctors. Is
doctor
that
shopping
Yeah.
basically.
is that
Yeah,
it?
just
Yeah.
like what a drug addict does. But yeah, the guy who wrote that book actually talked about another case where there was a woman who had her baby in the hospital for something, and right after the doctor goes out, you can see this on surveillance video. She picks up the toddler, starts rocking him, and then you see when he leaves the room, her take out a piece of plastic and literally start to suffocate him.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And when
What
he
was
lost his breathing for about 38 seconds, is what they timed it out as, she went and yelled for him to come in. He's having apnea again.
when was this recently?
Oh, this was the third edition of that book was, I think, maybe 1999 when he
Wow.
wrote that.
Okay. Jeez, that's
Uh,
horrifying.
oh, yeah. But, quite often they'll do other stuff, getting back to the poison again, like administering unapproved medicines or more conventional poisons. And psychological benefits. Sorry, I'm just going through here again.
It's
You know,
fascinating.
the disease is actually coined after, this is kind of interesting, the German Baron Karl Friedrich von Munchausen, who apparently was very prone to telling absolutely outrageous, impossible war stories to people around when
Didn't Terry
served in
Gilliam
Frankfurt.
do a goofy movie about him?
I was just
Oh,
gonna
yeah, I
ask,
think he did.
I was trying to figure out if it was the same name though. Is it Munchausen in the movie?
Yeah, I think it
I think it
is.
is.
The
The
something
Adventures of Baron Munchausen, isn't that
yeah.
it? Huh. But yeah, it was a doctor in 1951 who actually applied it using
Huh.
him. But yeah, let's
So
see.
basically, it was only recognized as a condition in the 50s. I wonder how long it has gone on before that. I often wonder about
There's
some of
no
these.
way to know, right?
Yeah, I often wonder about some of these conditions that are diagnosed and how far back they go, and no one recognized what it was.
Yeah.
If
Well,
it
and
was
then
indeed.
the FBI in 1976 also elaborated on it a little bit. They discovered a case with 4 children who were so badly abused from MBP that they were literally dwarfs. I mean, they, were shrinking
Wow.
basically. But
Oh my God.
yeah, yep.
Some of the things people do to their children is horrific, and I mean, I don't have children myself, but it just makes me feel ill sometimes.
Oh yeah, and what's so weird about it is the mothers are usually described as cooperative, pleasant to deal with, bright,
Yeah.
involved in the care, and knowledgeable.
Well,
Well,
of
that's
course
what I
they would
mean.
be knowledgeable.
That's
They have to be,
well,
they have to bone up on all of the and symptoms and treatments and all that shit, right?
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. You know what else is interesting there, though, too? There's been documented cases of it in babysitters, not just the
Oh,
close family. And there's also been some documented cases of
that would be
people abusing their pets to do it.
it would have to
what?
be it'd have to be a regular babysitter, like a daily caregiver, right?
Like a nanny.
Mhm.
Like a nanny type.
But wait a minute. Go. People do this. Sorry, people make their pets sick and take them to the vets. There's Munchausen by proxy with animals.
Mm-hmm. It
That is
also exists
crazy.
there too.
That's
Another
expensive.
case. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, another case there. There was a mother who was arrested for asphyxia on her 2-year-old child. And the kid had 18 trips to ERs in 3 different states. And
Wow.
the
Oh my God.
child's sister had died with a COD of SIDS.
Uh,
So probably not, but she had 20 trips to
oh my
ERs.
God.
So
You know,
So wait a minute. So a kid that has made 20 trips to the ER suddenly dies of SIDS and no one thinks to investigate it?
I guess not. Not
Wow.
sure
would
why there.
would have been different ERs, I bet, spread out.
They weren't coordinating their
Yeah,
their
records.
info.
Yeah,
Kind of like the serial killer going between jurisdictions.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wonder how much of, this attitude of, um, you know, abusing children can be traced back to the concept of them being property.
It
Mm,
could be, but
I don't know. Is there any evidence that people that do this have been themselves abused and or had something
that's a
either
good
either
question.
either physical? Because I would imagine that if someone was so psychologically abused as a child, they were constantly seeking some sort of attention or
Hmm.
something, then having a child themselves would be perfect.
That's probably true. I'm not totally sure on that though. But yeah, in that book as well, they had a little bit about actually interviewing the person, getting them in the box and drilling them about what happened.
Yeah.
Some
You know,
pointers on that.
it's interesting that I hadn't really thought of it, but my mom was probably borderline Munchausen.
Oh,
Really?
why do you say that?
Well, because so when she was a young girl, and I mean little, like I think 4, something like that. Like she had a accident in the winter with a wagon, and she had a head injury, and she spent time in bed, and she got a lot of attention from a lot of people, including her dad, which didn't happen very often, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so she saw that time spent in bed being sick as a real positive thing.
That's probably saw it as a way that she could manipulate too.
Well, I mean, she wasn't manipulating as a child, obviously. She really was injured. But
Well, yeah, I'm
but later on, you know,
as a way to get what she wanted.
right,
I guess you
she
could say, yeah.
she very easily would turn, the slightest thing and she would be sick, quote unquote sick,
Hmm.
with vague symptoms, nothing, you know, nothing with a
That's
name, right? But
Oh
she
yeah,
would
and that's
she would spend days in bed being with these, you know, illnesses
uh-huh.
of hers.
That's another thing that's been very unclear with Munchausen by proxy, whether the offenders are lying or whether they believe their own BS. So in short, are they psychopaths or are they delusional?
I'd be interested in reading you know how sometimes you get like psychological like books written by psychiatrists who have interviewed people. I'd be
Hmm.
Hmm.
interested in reading what someone who has it has to say about what they're doing, that'd be interesting.
It would be. But yeah, this cop had a couple of pointers on interrogating them, some things that he had observed. He says you have to drive home the reality of the situation to them. Often they will switch between extreme displays of sadness and anger as a defense mechanism
Mm.
against that. Um, and it's often been compared to a faucet turning off and on, how
Well,
they can switch so fast.
that's very bipolar um,
It
behavior.
really is. There is a bit of a correlation there, too, he said. Um, But yeah, and that switching tends to end when they feel they aren't being observed when you're
Oh,
interrogating.
okay.
And it's all very well rehearsed, very calculated, and it's all about allowing them to equivocate. Um, and the repetitiveness of it tends to give an avenue for them to rationalize and detach themselves from the quote abusive behavior in their own minds.
Oh.
They
Right.
use that as a way to rationalize.
But they don't see it as abusive behavior.
Right. Exactly. It's all about the self-preservation of their bruised ego when you get them that far. And abdicating that responsibility, it allows for denial of reality and perpetuation of the fantasy that got them into Munchausen by proxy.
Hmm.
And make sure there are no outs when you're talking to them. They may come clean when they realize they're caught, and stay non-judgmental with them if you can to get them to confess more. Um,
So,
so,
so here's another indication about my mom that comes to mind. She had a small stroke. Doctors said should have had full recovery from. My
mhm.
oldest sister moved mountains to get her into the best stroke rehab center in the region, and she wouldn't do the work.
Oh
Oh,
wow, man.
So she spent the rest of her life in bed, which is exactly where she was as a 4 year old.
that's interesting.
It became a pattern by that time.
Yeah.
Definitely. Wow.
She
And
she was completely abusive to the doctors and the therapist, and they kicked her out. They said, "We need this bed for people who are going to do the work."
wow. Well, and they have to balance that use of resources too.
Absolutely. I don't blame them.
Yeah, not at all. Sad though.
Yeah.
Oh, and another interesting thing is part of that. Pointer, he put in big block letters in there,
Yeah.
do not address their fear of losing their victim. You know, like if it's the kids, do not
Oh,
address their
like,
fear of getting them taken away.
so don't go there.
He says that appears to be the biggest block to getting a confession from
So
them.
sorry, if you threaten to take the child away, like child services, they freeze up or something? They stop operating or?
Not necessarily just a threat, but even just bringing up that, hey, you're going to lose your kids if you don't cooperate,
Yeah.
tends to be a block. So he
It's so,
said just totally avoid saying anything about that.
it's so odd because surely they must realize that poisoning their own children or harming their own children potentially results in them losing the child through death. So it's weird that, them deliberately killing their kid is okay, but if you say that we're going to take your kid away to save his life, that's a big no-no.
Right,
Yeah.
because they know the kid's going to get better.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, and you're talking about a diseased mind
But if the
here.
whole point of this is to gain attention for yourself, then losing your kid, no matter if it's taken away or if it dies, are both equal importance. But it seems like they freak out more if you're going to take the kid away than if the kid actually dies.
Because the kid
Maybe
won't
I'm
die.
just
Because the kid won't die if it's taken away, and they
Well, and
won't
if
be
it,
able to get attention from the child if it's out of their grasp.
Well, that's what I mean. She won't be able, or the mother won't be able to get attention from the child if it dies either.
well, you can still get attention from other people, though, if it
Yeah, I
Right.
does.
suppose the sympathy and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
being a mother of a dead child is, huge sympathy points.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm. Hey, yeah, the minimize separation as a whole was his other point there. Um, Biological family are often a big support for the offenders. The spouse accepted, because quite often the spouse of um, the MVP person is lied to as well throughout
So
all
the spouse
this.
actually goes along with it? I mean, in cases where these things are discovered, is it usually the doctors that report it, or is it a family member or a spouse?
Usually the doctors
That's
with
amazing
that.
that the spouse would actually allow this, unless the spouse is it's
Y-
being hidden from the spouse as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
typically
they're
that's the case. The spouse is unaware that this is going on,
yeah, they could be being manipulated as well, or
right?
they
Yeah.
could it could be they just don't want to see what's going on. But
I wonder if there's an example. So you said so we know that Munchausen by proxy is mother-child type thing. Is there a father-child
um,
example, or is there
well, they
a
can have
partner, like someone doing this to their husband, or are there other cases of these kinds?
Munchausen by proxy doesn't just apply to mother child. It just happens that it's most often
Okay.
mother child. I mean, it can apply to anybody in their
Care.
their charge, as I said.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that could be child parent, um, child grandfather, or what have you,
I
or
think
the
I
other
saw
way around.
I think I saw a CSI once where the wife was deliberately keeping the husband ill, and after like a week, he started feeling better.
Oh, yep, that would be Munchausen.
Yeah.
And
Oopsie.
like I said, and
Oops. Yeah.
like I said as well, Sharp Objects gets into it. It gets into it pretty well too. It's a hell of a watch, hell of a read too. Great novel
I'll have to take a look at that.
by Gillian Flynn.
Guys, we're gonna have to do this one again because we got way more material to get into than we have time for. This has been
We do
fascinating.
It's been great.
a great show. And saved
So,
it. Rest
A
for
couple months
later.
down the road, we'll do Chemical Reactions 2.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Oh, we have to, yeah, because we still have the giggling granny to talk about, and she is hilarious.
And the Angels of Death, like,
Yeah,
and Shipman and other people.
Tylenol product tampering.
Yes.
Yep.
awesome.
Perfect.
That was
All
so much
right.
fun on this show.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for bringing your wealth of knowledge as usual. And Wes,
Thank you,
whatever it
Kelly.
is you do, I don't know. It's
Thank
been
you
a
so much
great
for having
show
me.
once again. Thank you both.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Night.